Well, hello everyone, and thank you for spending the remainder of Drupal GovCon with me talking about relationships. Hopefully, either you're in some good ones already and just are going to be reaffirmed at how fantastic your relationships already are, or going to get some tips to find one or get out of a bad one and get into a new one. So we're just going to talk about relationships this whole time. I'm Jenna Dillette, and I do really, really like people, and that will probably be pretty obvious. And I also happen to work in software. Along the way, I went through like a writing phase, and I was emailing New Yorker writers and seeing how I could become one of them or something like that. But I love what I've found now because I get to work with all kinds of different people all day long and address real challenges. I work with Square. We're a team of Drupal and City CRM experts providing strategy support, hosting, ongoing support, outbound mail services, all things like that, and work in operations. So let's get into who you are and why we're here in this topic. So maybe you are currently solo and everything that you have with your infrastructure is managed by you, is managed in-house, and you're constantly learning new things to stay on top of it. Or maybe you are in a really bad relationship and you need to get out of it, and you know it's bad, some details of that, but it's still gut, and you just need something different. You need better support. Or you just got out of a bad relationship with a technology provider and still haven't found that better one to replace, but you're satisfied, or you've seen it all and you could be co-presenting this session. So with all of that in mind, we're going to look to see how we can have better relationships. So why this even matters to begin with? Well, the obvious is because we're talking about real money. I mean, typically the hourly rate of a tech consultant is going to be a lot higher than anyone you may be paying your hourly rate in-house for any of your full-time team members or contractors you may have. And so there's a real cost with tech. But at the same time, the investment that you're making in your technology, those dollars also often represent some really big process changes of exactly how and who is doing work. When you make significant changes to your environments, often that is shifting how your existing team members are getting their job done. And those how questions that technology then brings in has a big impact on what the culture is within your organization, which is why it's really important to have that relationship as strong as possible. The other thing is that we're all live animals, right? Like, I mean, I think at this point, especially with the year we've all been in together, I think of it as kind of a daily rhythm of life question of we all spend a bunch of hours a day doing work. And if we're not satisfied in those relationships, or we feel like they're conflictual, or we're not able to communicate what it is that our organizations need to get that out of that and to that be responded to, it makes it harder at the end of every single day when we're laying down on our pillow to feel like this was a really solid day. So if we have better relationships overall, that's only going to be a positive thing personally and professionally. And the big takeaway, and hopefully the session today will remind you of your ability to be an opinionated human on this earth, is that you absolutely have a power of choice. Drupal is beautifully open source, right? That's been celebrated in a ton of different ways for the last several days this week. And if you're not satisfied, then you can always do something different with somebody else and not have to leave the platform at all. And so you have the power to choose and to remember that when you're feeling the need to make a new choice. So this is my sister, Tia, and my youngest son, Ellis. It's just adorable. And she's a nurse. And I really like what she said a long time ago when she was in nursing school. And one of her professors was talking about how you should never settle in nursing, because there's so many different types of nursing that if you get uncomfortable or don't like the type of nursing you're doing, do something different. Become an emergency nurse, become a women's health nurse. There's so many different types of specialties. And I think that completely applies to technology of everything is by example, and everybody likes to talk about Drupal as Lego blocks. And so there's so many variations on how we can do the same thing, so many different options for how we can deliver that. And being able to have that in mind. And so you're not feeling like the product that is being given to you or the product that is being presented to you as the best solution is the only way that you can get that job done. An openness to to creativity and an openness to learning what other solutions might exist. And so some of that goes into both open source, which Drupal is, and many other tools are that work with Drupal, as well as proprietary tools, an ample amount of that also can be integrated in, and all of the options that exist in the relationship then between, as well as what you can do with site building just out of the box versus custom development. And even though no one is a magician, I think overall that our biggest magic that we have as humans, whether in the technology space or generally, is our ability to ask questions. And so many of times those questions can settle on getting more and getting in a unique way than what we may be thinking about solutions to the problems that we're trying to solve within our organizations. So now that we've been through a couple options, there's been some technology agencies we've been talking with, we're in the courting phase. And so it's time to kind of collect the what's what and who's who, is how I like to think of it. If you're vetting different vendors and trying to determine who is going to be the best fit for your organization. And the most basic is get it in writing. What do the contracts say? What is the language that's just really confusing? Or maybe you just started in a position and your organization is already with a technology partner. You can absolutely track down that paperwork. And if you can't find the paperwork, well, that's a problem too. And you can ask your vendor to give that to you. And just to know what's in writing, is it up to date? Where do you want clarity? Are you getting all of the services already that in writing you're supposed to be receiving? And if you're not, that's not confrontational to point that out. Those are all questions, and that is our power. The next thing is understanding who the people are and kind of what their positions are, that all of us need to be responsive and speak to somebody, right? Everyone is reporting to somebody else. And what I've seen again and again and again is that when there are sort of a single point of contact, then that can be where there's failures. Because if there's a misunderstanding just between two people, there's no one else to kind of back up to understand what was either agreed to, what was discussed, the timing of a rollout. And so the more people that you can have as contacts, then the better ability you'll be able to have as kind of a resource and to go to if questions ever arise. I also think about main points of contact because I've worked in sort of the same software space for the last 5 years, but through sort of 3 different company hats. And so, right, you can implement the same software, but in very different business models. And I know in the past, there would be times that I would use we statements, right? That wonderful we statement, when I completely knew that, say 2 hours before that, me, myself, and I had been the we that was doing that work. And so that's another reason and benefit too of really trying to nail down who it is that you're working with. The next thing I like to think about that is important, especially when vetting a new potential client, is how can you break up with them? So if things go really poorly, or they don't even go poorly, but it's time that you both move on to your separate ways. Your project has been implemented. Your software is working now as you expected, and your team is using it effectively. Then maybe you no longer need to have that relationship. So how can you end it? How onerous is that? How much money from a retainer is your technology partner keeping? How many days notice do you need to give them? All of those details, they never matter until they do. And so really just the better organized you can be in making sure that when you're vetting responses to an RFP that you're putting out, that you know people in position, you have everything in clear writing that's understandable to you. You know how you're going to break up with them if that ever needs to happen. That's checking a lot of boxes that may not matter in that beginning kind of honeymoon period when everyone is most excited about jumping into a new project, but really matters when it comes up. The next is about communication norms and just how communication happens. Is there a project management system? Is everything by email? Is there someone on your technology partner side that is a real person that will be kind of the main project manager or contact, or is it more of a generic support person? And finally, getting a sense of your team's expectation of what you want from emergency response. So if there's an outage, or you need help running a report, or you need help publishing a certain type of content, what ability do you have to get response after hours? And what does that look like? Does that change your rates at all? And speaking of rates, there's a lot to say about pricing structure. Like I said, I know from experience that you can implement the exact same software in very different business models and work very differently. And especially when vetting potential vendors and what that relationship will look like, there's a lot of different numbers that's important to try to get in clear writing. And if you have questions or red flags about why it's difficult for you to total up what it's going to cost you in order to have that agency work with you, then that's a red flag in itself. So specific initiation one-time fees or a subscription fee that's monthly in order to have access, or deposits that you do or do not get back, whether the technology agency works on more a fixed price basis, so you pay this much, they deliver you this, or time and materials, so just the amount of hours that are logged. And all of that added up together is the way that then you can know what your true budget needs to be, and any sort of adjustments then between your different department funds in order to deliver. So then we've looked externally at contracts and structure of what the technology partner is, but now there's an internal look as well. So your own organization's structure. And that's about really getting buy-in to everybody who's going to be using the system. And part of that is because it's likely that you're going to have more than one team using the system, using Drupal for what you're building out, but they're going to be using it in different ways and going to be expecting different results from that. And one of the organizations that I think is a great example of this is the Leapfrog Group. And they have very, very different teams. They collect health data across the country. And so marketing team, survey team, a lot of different teams, but using the same vendors. And so even though everybody is relying on the same systems in order to get their jobs done, they're using them in a different way. And the only way to control costs in the best way that they've come up with to do that and make sure that all of the work that they're having their vendors do is, eyes on the prize of what the focus should be, is creating a series of statements of work, having kind of a scope and also an estimate approved to that, and then kind of tasks ticket rolled into each of those statements of work that each of those different teams and departments are part of. So how you can have, in a sense, the organized chaos of everyone at the table together and able to get what they need from the software that everyone is using in different ways. So you've signed your contract, you found the right partner, all the ways that they're going to charge you makes a lot of sense. You know what to expect for what you're paying. And so now what about interaction? Now you've kicked off your project. And some of the things that I would most recommend of getting the most out of your relationship with your technology partner is just getting things in writing. I mean, I think I've sadly seen some of sort of the saddest things happen when there's these great intentions on what will be delivered, and then if that's just verbal, and that things all verbal are is a wonderful place for expectations to flourish, but then also expectations to not be met. And so hopefully your technology provider will also provide things back to you in writing, but you can do that yourself. And I think of that as just having timestamps. And even though hopefully you're never in a position where you're quoting directly an email that was sent 3 months ago and exactly the time, and presenting some sort of evidence in a court case, just the value of having that kind of paper trail, as I think of digitally, to know what the expectations are. And that makes it easier for you to loop in others, and with minimal effort, be able to share with your boss or share with other stakeholders you're working with that are absolutely going to be impacted, and their money is on the line too for having functionality delivered, for them to know what to expect and when to expect it, and for you to have that information ready at hand. And another thing that is critical to interaction, and so much of what we've been talking about so far is really kind of more towards decision makers, though I think anybody who is working with a technology partner, even on the day-to-day basis, that you're the one fingers at keyboard doing all of the work within your organization, within the systems that this team is supporting for you. Now I want to look a little bit at troubleshooting and some of the things in particular that can help in interaction. And that's sort of the 101 of troubleshooting. And I have IMBA here. This is an organization that they're the ones that sort of help put together some of the slides up ahead. They've done a lot of work specifically on the looping in others. And so I was a little intimidated when I first started working with them, because on every weekly call that we would have, there was not one, but two board members, as well as at least one of the main contacts within the organization. And so everyone was a little bit more on their best behavior, right? Because there was this opportunity that absolute leadership was having opinions on a really detailed basis of just how everything was working for their membership, for the organization as a whole, for the fundraising strategy. But what I saw over time is that kind of rising everyone to that higher level of keeping everyone on their toes meant that everyone was putting their thoughts out a lot more on what they expected. And then it did drive results faster, because no one could just be lazy, right? Like, you can't be as lazy when your boss's bosses are on the call. And so I know that that's not conceivable for everybody to have delegates or community members part of every sort of interaction that you have. But if there's anybody who can be supportive in that nature, the way that I know that increased accountability towards budget, and also kept everybody focused on what the most priority things would be, to stay focused on the technology impacts that would have the greatest impact for the organization, was significant. And another thing that they did besides that was really try to take more of their own troubleshooting or solving their own problems in-house. And so that's some of the slides here of just troubleshooting 101. Your ability that if something in your website is working weird, you can be more specific than it's broken. There's a lot more that you can collect and document for yourself, and then have that information to pass on to your technology partner. So part of that is describing the problem in detail of what it was that you were doing on your site and what happened. So basically, when that strange message or unexpected screen shows up that you normally don't ever see. And then before you even report it, testing your own access. Can you go to Google? Can you access anything from your phone? Is this a blip in your internet access? And then thinking about, from a timing perspective, is it always at 3 o'clock, like every day at 3:30 my internet slows down just randomly? I don't know what happens in the neighborhood, but that's the case. And so if something happens to me at 3:30 every day, I'm not going to immediately jump and think that there's a problem. And then of course, screenshots. There's nothing like a visual to help anybody understand better what's happening. And what for IMBA, the reason that having this, which when we say it out, it can feel so simple, but having this as a standard that they tried to hold their team accountable to more often, also meant that when they would request support or point something out, then for them, it was just saving time, right? There was fewer kind of more basic questions that then our team would need to follow up with them on of, hey, can you have a screenshot? Or what was the link of the page that you were looking at? What did the error message specifically say? So even though it's minor, there's a lot there that as an organization, when done correctly, you automatically have a lot more control of your budget and also what it is that you're asking of your technology partner. So now we'll kind of, after jumping down into the weeds of troubleshooting 101, we'll like climb back out and just look a little bit at thinking about figuring out what it is that you want. And this is often what organizations will call just a kind of a discovery process, or looking to define the functional requirements of a project that you're working on. And one of our team members recently went through a process of learning about appreciative inquiry. And I don't know how familiar folks are with that, but the purpose is to identify positive outcomes and then multiply their success. And I've had a lot of fun thinking about that lately in the context of what I do with organizations when I'm trying to identify what their functional requirements are, going through that discovery process to define their needs in order to guide our technology team's development in implementing a solution to meet their objectives. And part of that is that process requires that you have everyone at the table who is a stakeholder. So making sure that everyone is included and heard in the process, and that everyone who is going to be affected by that change is part of that process in defining the change. That sets all kinds of expectations and gets a lot more excitement from the beginning, which I know from rolling out projects, those are some of the biggest threats. I think I've learned that I need to be a lot more, I need to interject myself a lot more, that if we're implementing a project and it's maybe the organization's first time using Drupal and they're switching from WordPress to Drupal, and there's now an entirely new user dashboard experience. So when their members log into the system, they're going to see many more options and exciting options than they've ever seen before, but it's still a big change. And what is the communication plan and strategy that the organization has to tell their community about this big change? And having buy-in and having the right people internally on your side at the table to have those discussions and to have that kind of planning means that not only will hopefully the definition and the details that are needed to roll out that functionality just be that much stronger and that much more specific, but the adoption, both internally of your team using the new tools that valuable time and money has been spent to develop, but also the broader community is going to be accepting of it. I also love the concept because it's about people, right? But I love just user stories and what that even means, and having a user story as kind of your functional test. And that can be exactly what it sounds like. So every organization has a bunch of different stakeholders, right? There's a lot of different audiences or aspects of your community that you're speaking to. This part of your website is to this community. This part of your website is to this community. And if you could write out a path of kind of what you would want those individuals to experience, different variations of a path. And then as your test, go through, can I, as a donor, do this following list of things that is part of my story, my experience in a system. And if I can't do that, well, something needs to change. A new development needs to be completed in order to meet that user story, to keep it person-centric, even if it's representative person. And then going back to no surprise of sharing what you don't know. And so that's all about going to ask questions, and that there's no reason to ever be apologetic about, I'm sorry, I just don't know Drupal that well, or what the options are. That's why you're hiring someone to help you. And it is their job to help translate what your options are. And if they aren't options, right, you have choice. You have the ability to choose. So some of what I was talking about was US Chess Federation. So they kind of went through that process. They had a WordPress system that's now Drupal. They had a user dashboard experience that is completely different, was thrown up in the air and landed with a completely different look and a lot more functionality than they originally had. And their ability to be on the same page internally to set expectations, since we were throwing in some ways every individual team member's processes kind of out the window. Here's your new software and here's your brand new procedure for how to implement it. That was just as important as the external communications to their community as a whole, to every single member and tournament director that is logging into the system, putting those together and respecting the unique power that both have in making sure that not only a project is a success, but a relationship is a success, as well as a success financially, is really critical. So now I want to close with a few, just what I think of as warning signs. I already joked a little bit about we statements, but that's a real thing. And I'm not saying that it's to be wary of small shops, right? Like, don't be wary of small shops, but do be wary if it feels like an overpromise of something, and that there's different things to pick up. And I just know that in the past, when I would use we statements, and then I would think of how I would really deliver on work if I had the capacity to do something or not. I don't want to be the failure. I don't want to be the bottleneck, right? It can get really crowded in the bottleneck. The next thing that I think of as a warning sign is who's the guinea pig? So the senior developer we work with, he always likes to think about estimation is that number is completely based on what he doesn't know. So he'll first look through functionality that's required and identify, like, oh, module for that. Yep, we did that over here. Module for that. Oh, I have no idea about this. And then that, I have no idea about this. That is the thing that defines what the budget is. And so just being aware when you're pitching projects, if you can get a sense in any way, and this can be directly asked as, do you have examples of other organizations you've worked with and delivered similar functionality? That That is a real and should be often asked question, because you don't want to be the guinea pig. Or if you are the guinea pig, it's good to know that you're the guinea pig. And it's good to make that decision together. And even from a financial standpoint, perhaps go kind of half and half, that maybe you know that you're taking a risk, that what you are wanting your system to do has not really been tried before by the partner you're working with. That's fine. And maybe there's some financial sharing that you're doing, that you're not paying for all of that learning on your own, that your partner is paying for some of that as well. Another big warning sign is just the basics of responsiveness. I take some of the just, perspective clause, and one of the biggest, most basic thing is, I just wouldn't get a response to my email. And that's a real thing, and also something that you can point out and say, I'm dissatisfied with the lack of response that I get in my requests. Who can I contact to let them know this? I mean, that's absolutely worth complaint. Just like with my kids, if I don't say something, then I can't expect, them to stop throwing food on the floor, or whatever our current thing is that we're working through. So responsiveness, you should have it. Your dollars are worth it, and the relationship is worth it. And so point it out if you're not getting it. And then in general, if you're just seeing new alerts in your system, if you're seeing new little red bars in the upper right corner when you're logging into Drupal, that's also a sign, and you can absolutely ask your provider of, hey, I noticed this today, take a screenshot of it, the time you sent it, can you explain this? How can I have this go away? So those are all different warning signs that if more addressed in real sign, then hopefully they're not a warning of anything. And then the answer of that will also give you kind of a better understanding and answer of how your technology even works and what you can get from your partner. So to kind of have the takeaway, right, in conclusion of relationship advice and how to get more from your technology partner. This is a painting that I have hanging right by my front door. That's why I get to see it every time I come and go into the house. And I think the big conclusion is just don't be afraid to ask questions, and sometimes say things that you may not always be comfortable saying, but because it's worth it, because your day is going to go better working in your systems, and you're not going to have as many frustrations or headaches if you're at least enjoying the relationship that you have with people who you're doing the work with. And it's the same as coworkers as it is with someone that you may only interact with once a month or every other month. I know that these are real relationships to me, and anything I can do to just not make them difficult, that we're implementing software, right? There's a lot of what we do that's very black and white, like either these modules exist or they don't, or we have a model for that from another client or we don't. But it's everything that happens in between that can either just make me feel really good about that, the way things are going and how that relationship is going, and the kinds of things that we can build together in the future, or have questions and feel like work is not appreciated, or I'm not getting the response that I think that this deserves. And so to all of us, if we can just dare to read, think, speak, and write more, then I think our relationships would be a lot better. So we have about 15 minutes for questions and just discussion. And so I would love to hear from folks on just either challenges you're facing now, or how to kind of think through and troubleshoot an interaction that you would like to have different. And I'm going to look if I could have moderator. I still have it pulled up the chat, but if we have anything happening in chat that I can see. There we go. Has anything come through in chat? I don't know why I have an inability to pull up the chat.
No, nothing's coming on chat. Celine says hi, but I don't see any questions that are being asked right now. So if anyone has any questions, please post them in the chat right now, in the Zoom chat.
There we go. There's the chat link.
So yes. Celine has a question. I'll let you go ahead and read that.
When people change in a project, that's when problems come up. Yes, and so I thought about that. One question that I think would be great for everyone to make a note of when you're talking with specific vendors is, how cross-training works. So my daily life, and I'm operations manager, so just like trying to keep all trains running on time. And that is something I am always trying to be aware of if we have a client and they are always uniquely working with Brian, and Sarah on our team is not the one who's ever working with them. If he gets really sick, what happens? Because then all of a sudden that organization is not getting the consistency of a team, they're getting the consistency of one person. So how do you deal with ever-changing teams where relationships go out the door? A lot of that is documentation that I see too. So one of the things that is a good reminder about Drupal is a content management system. And so I know one thing that we've done with some organizations is just create a new content type whenever we start working with someone called documentation. And it's content type that's only available to the staff role or admin role, whatever you may have, that's different from, say, a member or anonymous user to see. And then to have as much as possible that both you can create and put as your kind of SOPs within the website itself, because it's about managing the software, managing your system, as well as any new functionality that is being rolled out, to have that documented both from a technical perspective, so any of those details that any future developer may need to read, as well as functionally what was required to develop that. So having a new content type in Drupal, so then the documentation about the thing lives in the thing. So as long as you have the right admin access to the thing, you can get all the historical information from it. And then also the question to your technology partner, maybe that you even have, is, hey, I've been thinking, we really love Brian's work, but what if he leaves? Because I don't want then kind of all the organization knowledge that is stored in his head to then be lost, because then you're not getting the benefit of kind of a technology agency anymore, more than a technology person. And that's significant. And I say it's definitely the challenge of how to do that kind of cross training, of what that means for trainings, demos internally that have nothing related to maybe active work that we even have for you. But yeah, it's walking out the door. I think of it as, that's the big thing of, so I used to work for a nonprofit human organization focused on human services and a bunch of different services in Southern Colorado. And I always thought about it being, how could I download my executive director's brain, right? Like, he had all these relationships, and like, that's what a CRM is for. Of like, you can have all those relationships that you download, but the same thing is true with all of our strategies. And the pros and cons of having really strong relationships with people is that when they change, then that's a threat. I know on the technology side, at least in our business, when we see an executive director change, that is sort of the biggest threat to then a potentially big software change, where the last, the new executive director really, really loved Salesforce, so whatever the CRM is, we're moving away, or really, really loved WordPress. So why in the world are you on Drupal? This is impossible to use. And then big technology change. And the same thing I know is true when we have folks leave, of how can I make sure that then our clients aren't going to be impacted by that. And it's fine to ask those questions and for you to expect that a plan be developed, that you want your information, that knowledge that has been accumulated and developed over time, you don't want that to be lost. So what is your partner's plan to make sure that that is shared across? If anything, doing that kind of sharing is probably going to give everybody else on their team many more examples on how to solve similar problems, right? So if some other organization comes to them and they want to solve something that has been solved and implemented beautifully within your system, well, here's another example that they may not have known about it before. So that's a huge kind of pitch or reason for why that's a benefit to everyone, that we aren't all in silos. What else? Where else have people experienced kind of blocks in relationships, or when things have gotten a little awkward, when things become of note and it's not just an easy exchange that you have? Yeah, well, for, one thing, it's not like a joke, but I say for me, I really love, the question is, how are you dealing with relationships and COVID? I appreciate that people turn their cameras on more often. I mean, maybe that's a really simple thing, but at Square, we've been always remote for all 13 years. Hi. And I feel like immediately starting in March or April, all of a sudden a bunch of organizations I'd been working with, you know, for a few years, it was like I got to see them for the first time. So I think that there's been this upswing, especially in this technology land, right, where we all are appreciating and seeing the value of relationships in a different way. And also, I would hope some of the having hard conversations, that it's worth it, because society, like, it all feels more life and death because it actually is. And that maybe I'm too to a fault, like a professional and personal blend of how to exist in the world. But I really do. I mean, I don't want to end my day feeling frustrated by relationships, and I always try to hold on to choice. And so you know, I think it's flexibility too, right? All of us need to be more flexible within the environment that we're all now living in, and understanding of big changes. So big budgetary changes, people having to let team members go, big exciting functionality and projects that were going to be implemented in a system that now that program that was going to benefit from that doesn't even exist and is completely on hold. And so how we adjust and adapt and are flexible within our relationships, both professionally, is just as important as, I know all of us are trying to figure that out on a personal basis, how to be flexible and understanding and when to make choices. So I think a lot of the questions that each of us ask about personal relationships, in my mind, there's a lot of overlap in the kinds of understanding and also accountability that we expect from our professional relationships. What else, folks? Where else do you have questions or struggles? And yeah, thanks for that. I think we often talk about that we should expect more from our software, right? Like, there's so many tools in the world to use, and they all have really great advertising and a lot of the same features and functionality. But I think in this space, there's so much focus on what the tools can do, and tools are used by people. And so I appreciate everybody who did take the time to join this, because I think hopefully the last several days have given everybody some really solid questions to ask, and have higher expectations of their tools, have higher expectations of Drupal. But your expectations will actually be met when you have higher expectations of the people that are doing the work. And if you can put the two together, that's when you're really going to make some incredible impacts and stretch those dollars and check off the list of all of those things that everybody's bosses are going to care about. Well, if there's no final questions, I don't want to keep people from I know this is your last session, your final time. I can put the slides up. I didn't get that done before our session today, but I'll put these slides up on the session listing, so you can access my pictures of my sister and son and the different points that were made. And I hope everyone is feeling more bold, or feeling the reasons behind why to be more bold, and asking questions and getting more information up front, and collecting it even when you don't think you need it, because then when you need it, you actually really do need it. And just to take the moment to put more things in writing, and ask for clarity when you need it, and additional training when you know it would be of benefit.
Thank you, Jenna. I really appreciate that. So if that's all the questions, then we're going to end here. Thank you all so much for attending, and have a lovely day.
Thanks.